2024 has officially been dubbed as Fearless, the Year of Shadow, and while I don't normally cover video games on my channel, Shadow the Hedgehog is such an important character to me. So, to celebrate Shadow finally getting back in the spotlight after Lord knows how long, I decided to make a video dedicated to my favorite hedgehog, going over my experiences in the past, what he means to me and others, and what could be in store for him in the future. Salutations everyone, I am Ruby Moonrose, and welcome to a dedication video I call The Shadow Effect. I'm going to start this video by talking about how I myself discovered Shadow the Hedgehog. It's actually a pretty interesting story. And the best place to start any story is at the beginning. The year was 2005. That Christmas, I noticed a commercial for the new Sonic game starring his rival. At the time, I blew it off. I was not a Sonic fan at the time. I knew pretty much nothing of Sonic and Company. So I had no interest whatsoever. But then, that week after New Year's, I happened to go with the Blockbuster. Yeah, like I said, this was 2005, long before we had the miracles known as Netflix and streaming. I walked into the store to see the opening cutscene for Shadow's game. In that moment, something called to me. I took a chance. I spent all the money I had gotten for Christmas and New Year's on this game. And when I watched that opening for the first time, I was hooked. The dark and fast-paced atmosphere, the soul-pounding melody of I Am, and the defiant, overwhelming power Shadow displayed. It was like nothing I've experienced before, and it felt amazing. Since Shadow the Hedgehog was my introduction to the Sonic universe, I had no idea about Shadow's past, so it was like I was discovering his past alongside him. And it was fun trying to figure out what was real and what were just mind tricks to throw you off. It also didn't hurt that unlike Sonic, Shadow could use weapons and vehicles, making him come across as more mature. One of the other things that grabbed me the most about Shadow, however, is the fact that he was also my introduction to anti-heroes. See, while heroes like Sonic are buddy-buddy team players, and villains like Black Doom and Mephiles are pure evil, only caring about what they want, characters like Shadow aren't completely either one. Shadow can have good intentions to do the right thing, but he also does it his own way, regardless of ridicule or what others think. The idea of an anti-hero was very new to me, and I was fascinated by the complexity of Shadow's character. Unlike the straightforward heroes and villains I was used to, what made Shadow's game fun was that you could choose his path, and the ending was made depending upon those choices. And that's what makes Shadow's character interesting as a whole. The fact that he made his decisions based on everything around him, not just the right or wrong choice. That's also what makes Shadow and other anti-heroes interesting as a whole. Their relatability, which is something I was able to do with Shadow at the time I discovered him. At the time I discovered Shadow, I was 18. I was almost out of high school and didn't really know what to do with my life. Nor did I really give it much thought. I had always gone with the flow of things. I never considered planning for my future. But by playing Shadow's game and helping him uncover his past and who he was, it made me realize that part of the reason he was doing this was so he could decide his own future. And that helped me to try and figure out what to do with my own future as well. Another thing Shadow helped me tackle to understand is that while it's important to understand where you came from, it doesn't fully determine who you are. Shadow was created with the DNA of Black Doom, an intergalactic tyrannical ruler who wanted to conquer Earth, and the science of Professor Gerald Robotnik. But Shadow doesn't let the sins of where he comes from determine who he is. He decides that. I'm able to identify with this and understand because my father is an alcoholic who has let his addiction make horrible decisions in his life. It could have been very easy for me to go down that road, since that addiction runs on my father's side of the family. But I chose not to do that. I chose to make my father an example of what not to do, just like Shadow chose to keep his promise to protect Earth rather than get revenge or destroy it. Even though Shadow and I had come from dark and difficult beginnings, ultimately we were born and built out of love. I was born from my mother's prayer of love, wanting a child she could love and teach God to. And Shadow was built in the hopes that Professor Gerald would be able to save the granddaughter he left. Speaking of which... Obviously, the greatest influence in Shadow's life was Sega's most tragic character, Maria Robotnik. The cousin of Dr. Eggman and the granddaughter of Shadow's creator Gerald Robotnik, Maria was struck with a rare illness called NIDS, Neuroimmune Deficiency Syndrome. This disorder can result in an abnormal immune response, causing inflammation in the nervous system, as well as a dysfunction that affects immune functions. In layman's terms, Maria's whole nervous system would not only have experienced severe burning sensations due to the constant inflammation, but her whole body would have been unable to fight off germs and infections. So it makes sense that she would be confined to Space Colony Ark to protect her, as living on Earth would have made her extremely vulnerable to illnesses and caused her significant discomfort. It also makes her longing to go to Earth more understandable, as she never experienced what that would be like. It wasn't just mere curiosity. She was yearning for a life she could never have. Understanding the severity of Maria's illness helps us to see why she longed for Earth so deeply. This helplessness in the face of her suffering adds layers to Shadow's character and motivations. It also helps us empathize with the both of them. Maria was pretty much on the Ark with only her grandfather and the Ark staff. She most likely had no one else her age around her. Shadow had not just become her cure, he became her only friend, just as much as she became his. It also makes the fact that Maria was killed before being cured all the more tragic. However, this also adds to Shadow's character as well. Her sacrifice became the defining moment in his life. It not only fueled his initial anger and desire for revenge, but also became the foundation for his complex moral journey. Maria's last wish for Shadow to protect humanity, despite her own suffering, instilled in him a conflict sense of purpose. This internal struggle between his personal pain and his promise to Maria adds layers of depth to Shadow's character, making him more than just a dark counterpart to Sonic, but a nuanced anti-hero, grappling with loss, purpose, and the weight of a dying friend's final request. I would like to point out that there is one important characteristic about Shadow that makes him truly stand out, and that is his individuality and acceptance of self. He knows who he is and doesn't feel the need to change for anyone. He accepts and respects those who like him for who he is, and doesn't waste time on people who don't. I myself try to live by that example, as I'm not exactly normal either, nor would I want to be. That's the one thing I admire about Shadow more than anything else. He decides who he is and accepts that. Mistakes, faults, and all. In closing, Shadow the Hedgehog is an amazingly dark, interesting, and dynamic character with layers of complex emotions and ideals. While it's easy to just slap the label of edgelord onto him, it's almost an insult to do that because there's so much more to him. And I have a feeling we're gonna find out even more as the Year of Shadow continues. Thank you all so much for watching this, as it was a true passion project that I wanted to do, not just for me, but for all of us Shadow fans. Thanks again so much, and until next time, stay fearless.